While Donald Trump was busy rattling his saber at Canada, threatening 25% tariffs and calling it the 51st state like some kind of economic fever dream, Mark Carney was already 3 moves ahead on a chessboard Trump didn't even know he was sitting at. And by the time the dust settled, the game was over. Here's what just happened. Canada has quietly finalized a sweeping trade framework with the European Union, one that builds an entirely new economic corridor between Ottawa and Brussels, covering energy supply, critical minerals, and long-term trade protections. This isn't a minor adjustment. This is a structural realignment, and the timing was no accident. It landed in the same week Trump was threatening to economically strangle America's largest trading partner. Carney didn't argue. He didn't plead. He didn't hold a press conference to trade insults. He simply went around Trump entirely and left him holding a megaphone pointed at an empty room. What makes this so remarkable is that Trump's own inner circle reportedly didn't see it coming. His advisors are now scrambling to explain to him that the tariff leverage he'd been so proud of has effectively been neutralized. Canada built itself an exit, and it used Trump's own aggression as the reason to do it. How Trump handed Carney the blueprint. For months, Trump operated on a single assumption that Canada needs America more than America needs Canada. That assumption was his entire strategy. Apply pressure, watch Canada flinch, extract concessions. Classic strongman playbook. What Trump didn't account for was who he was dealing with. Mark Carney is not a career politician who rose through party ranks. He's the former governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. He steered monetary policy through the wreckage of the 2008 global financial crisis. He has working relationships with finance ministers, central bankers, and heads of state across the world. He doesn't panic under economic pressure. He spent his career managing it. So while Trump was making noise, Carney was making calls. Brussels, Berlin, Paris, meetings with the European Commission, conversations with energy ministers who've been desperate for reliable supply chains ever since Russia's invasion of Ukraine blew up their energy strategy. Carney didn't walk into those rooms asking for favors. He walked in offering solutions. Trump never saw it coming. What's actually in the deal? And why it stings the framework Canada secured with the EU covers 3 major pillars, and each one is a direct answer to Trump's threats. First, energy. Canada has the third largest oil reserves on the planet, enormous natural gas deposits, and hydroelectric capacity that most countries can only dream about. Europe has been desperate for stable, trustworthy energy partners since cutting ties with Russian supply. Canada just stepped into that gap with long-term commitments, locking in supply agreements, LNG export infrastructure, and renewable energy technology partnerships. Canadian energy companies now have guaranteed European buyers. European nations have guaranteed supply. American companies? They'll be competing for whatever's left, at whatever price Canada decides to charge, because the goodwill that comes with being a trusted neighbor has been spent. Second, critical minerals, lithium, cobalt, rare earth elements, the building blocks of electric vehicles, batteries, and next-generation technology. Canada holds massive deposits of all of them. Trump had been maneuvering to secure preferential American access to these resources. Carney just committed them to Europe first. American manufacturers will now have to bid against European competitors for access to materials their own industries depend on. Third, trade protection mechanisms. The agreement includes provisions that give Canada preferential status with EU member states and create structures specifically designed to absorb the impact of third-party tariff interference. In plain language, even if Trump follows through on his tariff threats, Canada now has pathways to maintain trade flows and economic stability, that route entirely around Washington. Trump wanted to use tariffs as a pressure tool. Carney just diffused them. The technology dimension nobody's talking about. Beyond energy and minerals, the deal includes joint research initiatives in artificial intelligence, green technology, and quantum computing. Exchange programs for engineers and researchers. coordinated standards and regulations that will shape how these industries develop across the Atlantic. Canada and Europe are building an integrated innovation ecosystem, and the United States isn't in it. Trump spent years complaining that Europe treated American tech companies unfairly. Carney just gave Europe a strong enough alternative that they don't need to depend on American tech to the same degree anymore. Canadian companies get deep access to European markets. European firms get a reliable North American base through Canada. American companies find themselves on the outside of a partnership that is actively building the infrastructure of future industries. 20 years from now, when the global economy runs on clean energy, electric transport, and advanced technology, the foundational agreements underpinning all of it will have been shaped in part by deals struck while Trump was threatening his neighbors and dismissing climate policy as irrelevant. Inside Trump's orbit, the reaction reports indicate that when the full scope of the deal became clear, there was genuine alarm among Trump's advisors. The realization is settling in that Trump's aggressive posture didn't bring Canada to heel. It accelerated Canada's departure from dependency on the United States. There are also reports that Trump attempted to reach Carney directly after the news broke. Carney's office responded that the Prime Minister was engaged in meetings related to Canada's international commitments and would respond to American inquiries through the appropriate diplomatic channels. That's diplomatic language, but the translation is pretty clear. What Carney understands that Trump doesn't modern trade relationships aren't spreadsheet transactions. They're built on trust, predictability, and long-term strategic alignment. When you establish yourself as the reliable partner, especially when your main competitor is erratic, threatening, and unpredictable, the world gravitates toward you. Canada's economy is roughly the size of one large American state. It is not a superpower by any conventional measure. But Carney leveraged Canada's resources, its reputation, and its geographic value to punch so far above its weight that the result reshaped North American economic dynamics. And he did it without matching Trump's energy. No rallies, no aggressive press statements, no public victory lap. Carney has been measured and deliberate in his public communications, framing the deal around Canadian and European interests, rather than as a response to American bullying. That restraint is strategic. Publicly humiliating Trump would only trigger an irrational escalation. Instead, Carney achieved his objectives quietly and let the results speak. That's not just good economics, that's good strategy. The trap Trump walked into Trump now faces a choice with no clean exit. If he follows through on tariffs, American consumers pay higher prices, American industries lose preferential access to Canadian resources and markets, and the economic damage lands on both sides. Except Canada now has European partnerships cushioning the blow in ways it didn't have before. If he backs down, his threats are exposed as empty. Every country watching will update its assessment of what American pressure is actually worth. Either way, the leverage is gone. And Canada is already in conversations with economies in Asia. Japan is paying attention. South Korea is engaged. Australia has reportedly been in contact about coordinating approaches to trade diversification. Canada isn't just building one deal, it's building a model, demonstrating that mid-sized, resource-rich, well-governed nations can construct networks of partnership that provide real independence from American economic coercion. Mexico is watching. So is everyone else Trump has threatened. The bigger picture, what Carney is really doing goes beyond any single agreement. He's preparing Canada for a world where American reliability can no longer be taken for granted, where any partnership with Washington might be reversed in a single election cycle, where commitments made one administration get torn up by the next, where allies get treated as targets. The agreements being built now will outlast this moment. The infrastructure being planned, the relationships being formalized, the trade corridors being established, these will define Canadian prosperity for decades, regardless of whoever is in the White House. That's the difference between tactics and strategy. Trump is playing for the moment, for the headline, For the appearance of toughness, Carney is playing for the decade. Here's the final accounting. Trump threatened Canada, expecting submission. He got realignment. He wanted leverage. He created the conditions that made leverage irrelevant. He wanted to project dominance. He pushed a neighbor into a set of partnerships that will make America less central to that neighbor's future. Carney didn't beat Trump by fighting him. He beat him by building something better while Trump was still winding up for the punch. Canada didn't win this by being bigger or stronger. It won by being smarter, faster, and more strategic, and by having a leader who understood that the best response to a bully isn't confrontation, it's options.